Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. I am your host, Daniel Faust. So, we've been talking about this month about authenticity and about authenticity in the bedroom because that is the most important place to go over and to have authenticity in the bedroom. We talked about Tuesday, about going over in the mask. So we gave you guys a day to go over and to process what mask you're wearing. I hope you went over and did the homework. Hope you went over and reviewed because it's very much important, which is going to tie to today's message about practice time. Because if you don't know what mask you're wearing, you won't be able to practice taking it off and being authentic. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Karen. And no, it's not about the Karens that are on the internet. I know I've heard this recently from my son. I'm cool now because my son keeps me up in the jazz of things. Karen's roughly a 35-year-old woman from Tacoma, Washington that's been married for about 6 to 8 years. She's gone over and has 2 kids. They are a newborn and 3 years old. And her husband, Bob, is going over and just working and grinding it out. They haven't had intimacy in a long time. Bob's usually yelling at Karen for many different things because of how he feels inside. A lot of his masks come off. Well, Karen doesn't feel appreciated. Karen's still working even though it's a post-COVID world and she's able to work in person. Karen goes over and meets a guy at work named Steve. Steve's just a casual guy that's going over in the board meetings and she sees from time to time. Karen goes over and likes Steve for his creativity and how he engages in the boardroom, but they don't regularly go over and talk. But Karen's feeling lonely. Karen's feeling depressed. Karen's feeling lost. Karen hasn't had sexual intimacy in years since the last, other than the newborn. It was basically accidental pregnancy more than anything else. Karen goes over and starts connecting with Steve because of a rare occurrence of bumping into each other in the parking lot on a cold winter's day. Steve goes over and helps her out get into the car, and that's about it. Karen now gets to see Steve in a sense of a whole new way and feels a deeper connection. Karen now tries to purposely go bump into Steve to go over and see if the conversations could go over and continue. She thought it was just cordial conversations and whatnot, and maybe a little innocent flirting. But Karen goes along and just allows things to go over and flow. One thing goes for another. They get stuck at work one day. They order food coming in because they had a long night to go over and work together. Originally, Karen didn't work with Steve. Now Karen's working with Steve on a regular basis with projects and those types of things. Karen goes over and now starts going over and talking to Steve on a regular basis, hanging out, doing the dinners and the whole nine. She still tries to go over and save her marriage, still tries to go pursue for intimacy, tries to pursue for closeness and everything else. Bob keeps going over and pushing away. It was at that one point when she was desperate in need and praying to God to go over and for her marriage to go over and change. Bob did not go over and change. Well, Steve went over and made an advance one time while they were having regular work and everything else, and Karen did not go over and push away that advance at all. So they had a makeout session. She felt loved. She felt cherished. She felt everything else. She felt the passion that she felt in her marriage years ago, that when she was with Bob, when they were dating and they went over and got married. Haven't felt that love, haven't felt that respected, haven't felt that good in a long time. She feels kind of guilty about it, but again, Bob still keeps refusing. She keeps coming home, has to engage with the kids, do all the work, go over and basically she's working both jobs like most women go over and do, unfortunately. That's a sad statistic that roughly 81% of housework is done by the wives while still both going over and working. So things go over and press on, and she doesn't feel as bad about the whole kissing and making out thing. So now it's behind closed doors, those things happen, and intimate kissing and stuff like that. And now she goes over and tells Bob that she has to go on a trip for business. They go over and get into an argument, but she goes over and goes. Well, Karen and Steve go on a business trip together. Now it goes from a one-night stand to regular flings and whatnot, and she's at least meeting Steve once or twice a week. But she now starts feeling convicted in everything else. And then she finally goes to a counselor because she's like, her faith says that she wants to work with the relationship, but she hasn't felt love. She hasn't felt cherished. She hasn't felt respect in a long time. And when Steve came along, Steve was providing all those things. I wish this was just a story, but this is how things go over and work in our society today. That this could be Karen, this could be Bob, this could have been Steve, this could have been a guy or a girl, whatever this is. No matter what the story is that Karen's story is common to our collective of the nation. And it's definitely a common collective what happens in the military. You go over and deploy, and you go over and meet somebody, and you feel distant from your spouse, or the spouse is at home while going over and serving, but doesn't feel loved when before the deployment happens, and sometimes even during or after the deployment happens. So how do we go over and avoid Karen's mess? Karen didn't go over and get married, and neither did Bob. They both didn't go over and get married to the point of having all this wearing mask and brokenness and going into adultery and whatnot. What can they go over and do? What they could have done to prevent this? Karen's mess is fourfold. It is mental, it is emotional, it is social, it is spiritual. It's mental because she doesn't feel connected to Bob in a sense, that so she goes over and mentally doesn't hear and see that love. It's emotional because sexual intimacy, cuddling, physical touch, words of affirmation, those types of things we talked about before, feeds the human soul emotionally to keep going. It's the social aspect of, if you're just going over and just coming home and doing the work and then just taking care of the kids, but you're not able to connect and laugh and with your spouse is there. And it's also spiritual because we all are spiritual beings, no matter if we have a faith or not, that we want to deeply connect to a human being in depthly, and that wasn't happening in a regular relationship. It was more like housemates than actually husband and wife. So I wanted to go over and implement 5 strategies to implement, which this didn't happen in my marriage in this particular regard, but I could have seen these steps either happening for myself or my wife when we were struggling at year 7. So wanted to give you 5 strategies. Some of these ones are probably very simple, but they're not being implemented on a regular basis. Other ones, maybe you've never done before. So I'd love to go hear the comments as I'm going through these things. And we'll go check on the comments. Hey, Richard Kaufman, thanks for joining. So let's get back. So our 5 strategies to implement. The first way to go over and break towards the mass and the brokenness and everything else is how we connected in the first place, is date nights. Now, I know you're saying it's 2021, it's hard to get out, we're still in COVID world. We're wearing physical masks while we're wearing mental, emotional, social, spiritual masks. How do we go over and do that? Well, you go over and do it safely. That's number 1. Usually when I do a date night with my wife or a date day, I go over and I typically if I do go to a public place, I don't go to a public place again for 2 weeks. That's just my suggestion. You feel more safe, go do it more often. But a regular date night to go over and to connect. If you're not having that emotional, social, spiritual, mental connection, date nights or date days can go over and do that. I took off tomorrow to go over and connect half the day with my wife. Yes, there's a 90% chance of rain, but the point is to go over and to regularly, intimately connect. So if you're not doing that already, do that. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, hey, young kids, it's expensive, it's hard to go plan and coordinate. Well, DateBox is just one way to go over and to do that. DateBox, last rates I knew, I think it was $7.99 a month for the digital package. I think it's like $60 a month for the box package. They plan the whole date night for you. You get that social connection, you get that emotional connection, you get that mental connection, you get that spiritual questions. They bring really thought-provoking questions. You do interesting things, like I did cake pops one time when they first were the rage. We made coffee together. Usually it's a lot of food-oriented things because, everybody loves food. Not me, but that's the thing. So DateBox is a great opportunity. There's also definitely during Valentine's Day and this time, there's a lot of Facebook advertisements that give you a lot of great opportunities, give you a lot of great ideas. There's communication cards and other things. If you need suggestions, go over and get back with me. I'll get you those exact locations and websites and whatnot. But no matter if you have 1 kid, 2 kids, 4 kids, or a billion kids, which I'm at 4, sometimes it feels like a billion, but date nights is one way to go over and start implementing those things, because once you're connecting socially and mentally, then you're wanting to then get closer to start having those ripping off the mask and go over and rebuild that connection together. Because We all want to be authentic. We all want to be real. We all want to be vulnerable. Social media should not just be the place that we should be doing it. In our bedroom is the first place we do it. And we take that vulnerability that is safe in the bedroom, and then we pour that out into the living room, which we'll talk about next week, and then pour it out into the boardroom, which is your virtual or your physical spaces with the people you work and love. Just like over here, there's no way that I could go over and share intimate moments of myself if I didn't go over and work through that stuff. Now, I naturally do that, but if I want to be honoring and have all three rooms thriving, I have to know how to be vulnerable there first. And that's where I'm challenging you to go over and do that. Next one is plan intimacy. Doesn't matter if you're newlyweds or if you've been married for 20, 25 years. When you're dating and when you're quote unquote living together in early marriage, you're having intimacy on a regular basis, sexual or going over in other ways of intimacy. But once we start having kids, once we start getting back to business, usually about between a few months to a few years when the honeymoon phase ends, we base it on moods. How is it going to take two human beings to be both in the same exact mood at the same exact time to go over and do that? Now, when you're dating, it's on like Donkey Kong. But after that, even us guys, me included, go over, it might not be in the mood. So if you don't plan it out, it doesn't happen. Especially if you have sexual pain or aging and physical pain and whatnot. If you don't go plan out intimacy on a regular basis, it can go away. Especially if you have different people. I'm a night owl, my wife's an early bird. God, never intersect. I'm in pain in the morning because of my physical ailments. I'm usually more loose and ready to go at night. My wife is usually breaking down, whatever. If you don't go plan that intimacy, it won't go over and happen. We try to at least plan Wednesday for intimacy time. Not saying we don't do it more, but that's the specific plan time in that particular regard to go over and do that. Sometimes it's going to be sex. Sometimes it's going to be cuddling. Sometimes it might be just connecting on a movie. It might be sharing a book. It might be prayer. It might be a devotional. No matter what it is, planned intimacy into me see to go over and do that. The next one on a strategy and implement is the mess inventory. This is actually going to be the hardest one for you, not for them. For you, not for them. A mess inventory is going over and you want to connect. Let's say you're Karen and you've gone through this stuff. You have to go over and do a vector check. I need to go do a vector check on what I bring to the table. What am I preventing on my authenticity in the marriage? Is there mental thoughts and lies and scripts in my head that go over and prevent me? Is there emotional hurts and pains that I have that is preventing me to be authentic? Is there social things in that particular regard? Like one of my social things is like I feel awkward when I walk into a big situation compared to a small situation. So if I don't know what's socially going on and I just get thrown in a situation, I feel awkward. That's the same thing that can happen in intimacy. So from the bedroom to the boardroom, those things affect me. And also spiritually, is there things that you believe from your past or you're working through or you're wrestling with that prevent you to go over and connect? That inventory takes a bit of time, but it's something that we should go over new and implement to go over and to do that. I had to do it on the break of my marriage almost getting destroyed. I don't want your marriage to go get destroyed to do a mess inventory. I would highly recommend you to start working on it now. So, not saying you have to implement this strategy tonight, but the overall thing is that if we're not working through our mental, emotional, social, spiritual barriers, then we will just not be authentic. We will limit intimacy and we will become Karen or become Steve or become Bob. Put whatever name you want to go put in there. Let's go check the comments real quick. Hey, Cynthia, one of them joins, like my husband and I take turns planning those moments to work better for each other. That's thanks, Cynthia, for going over and sharing that. Going into our next one is vector checks. This is a military concept. The civilian concept is boundaries. So no matter what community that you're listening to is this. Dr. Henry T. Cloud writes a great book called Boundaries. Boundaries is going over and putting your safe space to go over and to share and how you do that. For example, let's say for me, I tend to go over and feel a conversation and I can respond, which is more react, very quickly. If I'm not giving my wife an opportunity to go over and to share and to bite my tongue, then I'm going to have difficulty for her being authentic and being real. We did that when we were dating, and then when we got married, we kind of jacked that up in our society. And also a vector check, which is very similar to a boundary check, is for you to regularly see what's going on. So for us, a vector check looks like this more. So this is what a more looks like for us. So that's the boundary to set up. But the vector check is like, hey, not on intimacy times. You don't want to do planned intimacy for vector checks. You want that to be a separate scheduled time. And we even do this with my father-in-law. So I'll try to bring it more living room-ish to make it easier applicable, and then you can bring it to the bedroom. We go over and have a set time and set meeting. We talk about certain things, the good, the bad, and ugly of this week. What things did I go do wrong? What things did he go do wrong? What did she go over and do wrong? The only difference is you don't bring your father-in-law into the vector check because it's a bedroom, but you and your spouse go over and see like, hey, how was your week? How did I go over and serve you? Which ways I did not go over and serve you? Is there any words that I over and said that were hindering you? Did I do anything specifically wrong, either passively or actively? And then when you have your set questions, because each questions have to be tailored to where your boundaries are at, because it might not be ready. A person that shoots off the handle verbally, you might not be ready to go do that. That person might not speak during that vector check. It might be the other person coming up and being vulnerable. But doing that on a regular basis, seeing where the person's at, a lot of pent-up anger, frustration, sexual need, intimacy, communication, maybe parenting problems, all those types of things, come up in those vector checks so you can minimize the threat of doing that. Because if someone like Karen would have said, hey, I'm feeling lack of intimacy, you haven't pursued me in the last week and whatnot, I would like to go over and have some planned intimacy time. Or can we go over and do that after tonight and stuff like that or whatever? Or can we go on a date night this week? Those types of things. It's been a long time. Hey, we keep missing each other. We're ships crossing through the night and we're not hitting up and stuff like that. Those things can be a lot of resolved preemptively before coming to it. People don't go purposely saying like, hey, it's like chess. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do it 8 steps ahead. And I know I'm going to do it, even though I'm having a great relationship. That's just how I am. That doesn't happen. It's a mental, emotional, social, spiritual stuff that just keeps compounding, and then it overflows, and then it pours out, and your mess pours into another place and makes a bigger mess. It's like cleaning a house. Your house doesn't just get dirty. It gets dirty over time. A little pickup a day, just like a vector check, keeps the monster at bay. So the same thing in your relationship, that vector check, I'd recommend once a week, to go over and do that. There's a lot of things that can happen in a week, even in this world of a digital age and whatnot. I went over and pursued contracts. I worked on stuff. I went over and I planned stuff with the kids to do a baking thing today. There's a lot of things that just happened today, So having a week to go over and do that is going to help. And my last one for you guys, and then we're getting to the superhero challenge. Yeah! And I want to thank Cynthia for going over and joining. She's been driving up numbers like crazy, so I'll give her a shout out. If you're struggling with mental health stuff in that world, and especially in Canada, Cynthia is a great person to go over and connect with. She actually won our War Hero to Superhero. So if she's on, thank you. All right, so our last one is, this one gets when things are getting a little rough or you want to do some preventative maintenance and you just don't know how to rotor through. If you're struggling with any of these 4, consulting, counseling, retreats, and devotions. They all go hand in hand because you're pulling something out of the situation. Because all the things with date nights, plan intimacy, mess inventory, vector check is between you two. They're consulting, counseling, retreats, and devotions. Yeah, they all tie something outside of the factor. Let's check our comments real quick before we finish this. Thank you very much. All right, so consulting is dealing with the here and now. So just to explain a little differently, is consulting and counseling brings people into the situation if it's gone too far, or you just need an outside perspective. You usually want both people in agreement. Consulting is going to deal with the here and now. Counselors usually deal with the past. Consultants are paid for their service. Counselors can be used medical services and discounted and stuff like that. And they also do sliding scales. Retreats. I know it's hard in COVID, but there's even retreats like the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association called The Cove does spiritual retreats and marriage retreats still. They don't do them as robust as they used to, but you can even do a retreat yourself. There's a lot of secular and biblical and psychological courses that are built. You get yourself a hotel and go check out and go connect with the content over the weekend. You can literally build yourself a retreat. If you need help going over and building your own retreat, hey, 20-minute free phone call, I can go over and help you build the structure of that. So every military veteran, first responder gets their first 20 minutes free. And then devotions. Devotions is our books that usually are spiritually based that get your mindset on there. So you can also do the Abide app. You can do meditation apps. It's when you both get on the same page to challenge yourself on that growth. It's good, and those are a lot easier because they challenge you in the questions you would never ask yourself, thoughts you wouldn't go over and think about your marriage. So it brings you back to focus on going over and getting to a you and I type marriage. So this one's probably the most difficult one to go over and do, but this is a strategy that I have implemented in my relationship. There's times that I'm like, hey, we just need to go. I went to counseling for a while. We both have done counseling for a while. We regularly do retreats. You actually start enjoying them after you do them. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, the Cove, gives 2 retreats free for every single military member every single year, active, guard, and reserve. If you're retired, it's a different program and whatnot, but they're really not that expensive. And again, you can arrange your own. So if you need to do like an at-home virtual version, hey, let's go over and help you out. I can go help you build a quick structure and go recommend some resources and whatnot. So those are our 5 strategies that we feel that would start the process of going over and not getting the Karen's mess. If you want to avoid Karen's mess, Steve, whatever name you want to go over and use, we'd highly recommend one of these strategies. And here's our superhero challenge of the day. Woo! Because we are ending our week, because our content usually covers Tuesday through Thursday. You want to watch more in-depth content? Connect with us on our TV show. We're going to be launching live in the next week or so. Our superhero challenge for the day is review the strategies. Thanks for the thumbs up. Review the strategies and choose one to start. Here's the key thing. Don't rush the process, but make progress. I'm not expecting you to go and do elaborate date nights and pay $60 for Datebox and have intimate connections in 10 seconds and all the mess is dealt with, because your mess might be, hey, I'm just sexually frustrated and we haven't connected in a long time. Yours might be there's adultery in the situation, and you might see that there's reconciliation, but there's a lot of work to go through. Don't rush the process, but make progress. Choose only one. Don't be the hero and choose all 5. I did that, but the thing is I have 20 years military and I'm externally motivated and I just keep going. I'm not the norm. I did all 5 all at once, but that's, if you want to be that superhero, awesome. That's great. But my recommendation is, if you want to be successful, that's why it took me 5 to 7 years, because I pushed all 5 at once. It was overwhelming. So if you want to be successful, choose one to start and don't rush the process, but make progress. So, because if you rush the process, then you won't be making progress, because it just doesn't go effective. I was doing the mess inventory and plan intimacy and date nights while doing vector checks and everything else, and then they started to fizzle, and the only one that stayed regular was the date nights. That was it. So review the strategies, choose one to start. So thank you for going over and joining us. We will connect with you guys next Tuesday. Again, it's always a dialogue, never a monologue. You want to put the comments on there. You want to go ask the questions. That's great. Love for you to connect with us on Facebook. We have a new group called the Marriage Superheroes. So if you're ready to go take your marriage to the next level, we will be in there. We're going to start streaming our content in there, and we're going to give contextualized content and Q&As and other things of that nature. And you can also connect with us on any other place, like on Facebook and on Twitch and everything else. So Cynthia says, thank you very much. So awesome. So we want to thank you guys for going over and joining. Catch us next week in the living room on how we're going to be authentic in the living room, and how we as parents model taking off the mask so they don't wear it when they get married, because it's already painful enough. Why go over and go through it? Let us help them never put it on in the first place. So if we can help them to be a model, that's what we talk about next week. And again, if you have any questions, any things you want to add, always it's a conversation, not it's always a dialogue, never a monologue. Sometimes feels that way because all right, but that's pretty much about it. Woo! Lives are crazy. So we want to thank you, and we want to give shout out to our sponsors.
Millions of men and women have served this great country. However, over 40,000 veterans sleep on the streets every night. 20 veterans commit suicide on any given day. Veterans have been left without medical services while they suffer from mental illness and addiction. They are dying alone. Join Armory Dog and the Veterans Project to help serve this forgotten community of heroes. Veterans is a place for our men and women who have served our great country, giving them a place to stay and rehabilitate in a safe and positive environment. Please help support the Veterans Project so that these men and women can get back on their feet and find their purpose for living. The Veterans Project will house 10,000 veterans, getting them off the streets, back into society, and utilizing their skills as they once used to serve our great country. Veterans Not Forgotten. Join us now.